104.7 The Cave. KKLH, Marshfield, Springfield. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Touchdown, Kansas City!
Now, it's time for Ned Talk.
Yes, it is. Another beautiful Sunday for us to be talking sports. I am joined, of course, by the namesake for our show, Ned Reynolds. Ned, how are you today?
It is a beautiful Memorial Day Sunday. What more could you want? Sunny. It's not too warm. You know, I like it about 80 or 90, but we'll get there someday.
Ned's a lizard, for those of you that don't know. He's got a heat rock that he sleeps on most of the time in a solarium. We'll speak to John Oliver. John, how are you today?
I'm doing well, trying not to get caught in a pickle between first and home.
How's your Memorial Day weekend going so far?
It's been good. It's been relaxing. So.
Josh Roberts is with us. How are you, Josh?
Oh, I'm doing great. I do like the weather kind of cool like this. Sunny and cool. It's beautiful. Be nice to get out and do something.
Like what?
I don't know.
M-O-W.
No, D-R-I-N-K.
So let's get into it. There's a lot to talk about with sports. And where you guys want to start at? Where you want to start with sports?
Well, we can start with the St. Louis Cardinals.
Yes.
We could start with the Indianapolis 500.
Let's start with the Cardinals. Let's talk. They've been one of the hottest teams in baseball. They've cooled off just a little bit. But what's going on in the world of the Cardinals?
Well,
Bring
they're
us up to
playing
date.
a team right now who they have to sweep. And they've won the first three games in this four-game series with the Diamondbacks. If they don't win game number 4, it'll be a failure because this is not a good team. They have to be beaten. Them, the Pirates, the maybe the Miami Marlins, Colorado Rockies. These are the weak teams on your schedule who, if you're going to contend for a championship, you have to beat. So far, the Cardinals have. The Diamondbacks, they're a professional baseball team, yes. And they do have some talent on the team, but that's a team that is so inconsistent with what they did last night. Case in point, they've hit the ball fairly well. They're behind 8-5, I think it was. They score a run in the last of the ninth. It's 8-6, and they have the bases jammed. Can't score. They had the bases loaded twice in the game and can't score. Well, that's not a good team when that happens. Anyway, the Cardinals beating up on these teams, and they have to because they play the Dodgers starting tomorrow night, and then the very inconsistent Cincinnati Reds, who are not a bad team but have zero pitching. Anyway, the bottom line is this. The Cardinals are playing well. Are they a great team? I can't convince myself that they are, but they are taking advantage of circumstances which are being presented to them right now. What do you think, John?
I agree with you, Ned. As far as the Cardinals are concerned, you know, we've talked about the walks with the pitching. That has been a killer for them. These are series they have to win in order to get to the playoffs, even though it's early. They have to beat these teams like the Diamondbacks, like the Rockies. You know, you've seen the offense kind of tick up with Tyler O'Neill coming back. Harrison Bader should be back not too long. It's just a really inconsistent bag we get from this team. We have, you know, these superb pitching performances, and then they don't score a run. Then they'll score 13 the next night, and then the next night they've got 12 Ks and no runs. So it just comes down to that consistency again. I do like the offense better this year with Arenado. I think it's helped immensely having his presence in the middle of the order. But I think Cardinals fans are just going to see the kind of the back and forth inconsistency. The bright side so far is the bullpen is stellar. I don't remember having three pitchers right now like Cabrera, Gallegos, and Reyes that can shut down the 7th, 8th, and 9th.
The three amigos.
That's right.
Yeah. What do you think, Josh?
I don't follow the Cardinals. The Cubs are 8-2 in their last 10, though.
They've been hot.
They're only a half game back from the Cardinals right now.
Well, anytime they can get in a between home, I've not seen this until just
I haven't seen that
home
either.
plate and first base and get in a rundown
and then not be out. Yeah, that's
I've
fun.
never seen anything like that. That's bizarre.
Let's stop and talk about an interesting story that happened with the Cardinals this weekend. Manager Mike Schilt tossed during a game over a foreign substance argument. Your thoughts, Ned, on that whole situation?
I understand his point because the cheating that pitchers do, which is not new, but nobody's cracked down on it. And they do. He's arguing, he's Schilt, because, first of all, Cowboy Joe is the man who made Gallegos take his hat off. Anytime you're going to get into an argument on the field, it's got to be with Cowboy Joe or Angel Hernandez.
One of the two, yes.
Anyway, his point is, why are you focusing on us? Everybody else is doing this. Mm-hmm. And then when he got off in the press conference and blamed Major League Baseball for not cracking down. And I like Schilt for saying this because it's probably right. I'm going to get fined for this, but I'm going to tell you this anyway. His point is this: if you can crack down on the batters and other phases of the game where there is some level of inconsistency, where the rules aren't being followed, don't just isolate on that. The pitchers too. Hey, you guys remember Joe Negro?
Oh, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Nail file.
He's got it there in his pocket, for heaven's sake.
Gaylord Perry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, some really great pitchers have been known. And when you see these guys on the mound and they're constantly going to their hair, they're not doing that because they hope that they look good. They're putting something on the ball at that time.
Have you guys seen a hat from the 50s or 60s? It's not just wear and tear. This isn't anything new.
No.
There are competitive advantages in every sport. Baseball pitchers are going to have substances to get a better grip on the baseball. Where it crosses the line is when it affects the spin rate and the dip of the ball.
But I have a question as a more casual baseball fan. Mm-hmm. Why? I mean, I understand that it can greatly affect that, but why do they let them have, like, what's the rosin bag or whatever they have at the pitcher's mound? Why do they let them have something but not anything?
Yeah, but you see, the rosin bag is there for drying the hands. It would not really affect any kind of spin ratio or anything like that. It's moisture, and the rosin bag doesn't have any moisture in it. It's a drying purpose. That's the reason for it out there. So that part of it would be allowed. It improves the grip on bats as well as your grip on the baseball. But as far as making the baseball more slippery, like slippery elm and chewing gum, actually more bubble gum than anything else, where saliva is created, that's where you have the advantage.
Or grip, too, whenever you're putting like a pine tar or you're putting some sort of hair gel or something on the baseball and it makes it sticky. It helps with the grip, and that helps with the spin rate of the baseball. Sure. So my thing with this is I always think let them do it unless they're just stupid. I think you guys probably remember Pineda a few years ago, and he had a big pine tar mark on the side of his head.
I remember it well.
Yeah, and it's just like you're getting ejected because you're dumb. You're not even trying here to hide the foreign substance.
Well, and anybody that wants to attack baseball, if you think for 1 second receivers in the NFL aren't spraying stickum all over these wonderfully tacky gloves.
Well, they make those gloves to be so tacky.
They do.
Now. They don't even need stickum.
Oh, they still spray it.
One finger. I know they still do, but that's why they outlawed the traditional stickum.
No, this is much ado about nothing, Joe. I'm glad Schilt came out and called them out on it because it is so inconsistent. And what did Gallegos do after they took his hat and gave him a clean one? Oh, he went 1, 2, 3 and retired the side. Shocker.
He can pitch. The guy can pitch. Reyes can pitch. My problem with the relief corps is it's still May, for heaven's sake, and he's using these guys virtually every game. Come on, there's a point of no return here, and I'm not so sure that Schilt, I'm not criticizing his managing, but when you use relief, I don't know, I think the Cardinals have 2 or 3 complete games this year. One of them would be Wainwright, and probably Flaherty has one. You've got to have somebody to take those innings. You can't have your relievers in every single game, for heaven's sake. And again, Major League Baseball has changed considerably. You brought up a very good point, though, John, about the walks. The Cardinals are by far the Major League leader in allowing walks. I think it's 230. Maybe 235 or something like that at this juncture. And they're averaging 4.5 walks a game. We can get away with some circumstances like that, but there are other factors that are going to come back to haunt you. For instance, the one game that the Cardinals did win in Chicago against the White Sox, did you guys see how many Cardinals went down on strikes in that game?
Oh, yes.
14 strikeouts. And you say, well, my God, how could the Chicago White Sox not win a game? Look what happened to them. They left 13 runners on base. Now, is that good pitching, or is that just, hey, it's one of those days in which the hit just doesn't come? Well, who knows? Who knows what happens? But I will tell you this, that can't continue.
No.
You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, your local live sports talk show. Ned Reynolds, Josh Roberts, John Oliver, Joe Westen. We're talking Cardinals baseball. Let's talk a little baseball on the whole.
Yes.
John's kind of our resident baseball expert. What are you seeing right now, John? We're about at the quarter point of the season. What are you seeing?
Starting to see baseball right size a little bit because we talked about the horrible averages in the first month. You're starting to see guys make more contact. You know, again, people have pointed out, you know, the deadened baseballs. I'd be more of a believer in that if we didn't have 8 guys on pace for 50-plus home runs right now. I think someone, if you don't pay attention, and it's hard to pay attention because they move so often from field to field because they don't have a home stadium right now, the Toronto Blue Jays are really a fun team to watch.
Yep.
Vladimir Guerrero, I've always thought, had the ability to be an MVP contender. He is absolutely the American League MVP right now. I don't think that's up for debate. And if you haven't watched Braves games, you know, formerly America's team on TBS, thank you. Ronald Acuna, with being injured, still has, I believe, 15 home runs at this point. Fernando Tatis missed 3 weeks. He now has 15 home runs. I mean, there's a lot of young talent.
Tyler O'Neill of the Cardinals comes back from the injured list, and he had, was it 4 straight games?
Yeah, he's got 11.
11 home runs already. I'm going to throw in a little footnote about the Braves, though. They had a legal problem yesterday that may come back to haunt them rather significantly. This is our boy Osuna, who was, you know, I never did think he could hit the long ball and all that. He's not the guy the Cardinals really wanted from the Marlins. It was Yelich, but they got Osuna in the deal. And I'm not sure that he's a real stable individual. Case in point, now he's out with a couple of hurt fingers right now, but he also beat up, apparently, allegedly anyway, his wife last night, and the police saw it happening.
Yes.
Visually saw it happening. Yeah. So he may be OUT and not just at first base or second base or third. He may be OUT for a long time.
He's going to be investigated under MLB's domestic violence policy. One footnote to this, you talk about volatile. His wife was arrested twice last year for beating him up. So this obviously isn't a good situation. So at some point, I think something has to be done.
And
it's a little toxic.
Still married?
Still married.
Jeez.
Your Cubs are playing pretty good baseball. Yeah. I mean, surprisingly playing pretty good baseball. They're 29-22 and second behind the Cardinals, half game back. Padres, I think that was expected, that everybody thought that they would have a good season. I think what's probably surprising in the NL West is the Giants are playing good baseball with virtually nobody on that team.
Old is the new young, apparently, with Evan Longoria, Buster Posey, Brandon Crawford. They're all having superb seasons.
Oakland's come down to earth a little bit, but they're still out in front of the American League West by 2.5 games over the Houston Astros. The Astros are to be expected. The rest of that division,
Can I throw in a little consensus among you guys question here?
Sure.
You mentioned that. It just hit me. Oakland. Will they be Oakland next year?
No.
I do not think so.
I don't think so either.
No.
It's 3 against none, I guess, or 4 against none, because I don't think they will be.
No.
Where do you think they go?
You know, there's a couple of landing spots. Honestly, Las Vegas would make the most sense. Again, I know poor Oakland with losing these teams to Las Vegas. I've also been a big proponent for Nashville and Indianapolis getting major league franchises at some point. So.
I would like to see them go to Portland.
And Portland, Oregon would be a great spot
because
as well.
It fits with baseball. It fits with the geography of baseball. If you move them to Nashville or Memphis, then you're losing you'd have to shift things around a little bit. But so I'd like to see a team in Portland, and they have a rich history of baseball there. I don't know if did you ever watch the documentary about the Portland independent baseball team that Kurt Russell's dad had? That's a really interesting Netflix documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's pretty good.
I have to just offer, for what it's worth, a little disagreement. I think Las Vegas is where they would probably end up if for no other reason than it is a burgeoning metropolitan
Yes.
area that is still expanding almost daily, for heaven's sake.
my gosh.
And with the transient population coming in there and individuals who identify with various teams, I think both them and the Raiders, and you've seen what the Golden Knights have done with a hockey team in Las Vegas, selling out with every single game. I think the Athletics franchise would do very well there. That's not to say they wouldn't in Portland, but by the same token, I think that Vegas is probably going to be the more alluring atmosphere.
I agree with you there. I think that Portland is, again, another growing city. Be a great place to see a baseball team go. But, the allure, since basically, let's face it, over the last decade, sports has given itself over to gambling. It's just said, let's just go ahead and let's do that.
Oh, yeah.
I saw one ticker the other day. I don't know what channel I was watching, whether it was Fox Sports or Bally or whether it was ESPN, but the whole sidebar, which was almost a third of the screen, was all odds and over under and stuff like that. And I looked at it and I thought, this makes no sense to me. And I'm a sports fan. So, I mean, I get it. I get the allure that it's going to be there. And I'm not knocking them, but it would be good to see Portland get a team.
Yeah.
Josh, you have any thoughts where you'd like to see a team go? Maybe a third team in Chicago?
No, I don't think that's necessary. I kind of agree with you. I think it'd be good to see a team up there in Oregon, just to kind of keep the West Coast balanced a little bit. I mean, there's too many teams in California, so if Oakland leaves California, that brings a little bit of balance. But I don't know. I mean, I think they probably will end up in Vegas too, because like you all said, it's the allure of it. The flash. They're gonna have a huge fan base right off the bat, because that's what Vegas supports their sports, apparently.
Yeah, I don't begrudge the teams from moving from Oakland, though, because there's just it's a community that, first of all, that refuses to be held hostage, which I admire that, because sports franchises do hold communities hostage. I mean, we've seen it with St. Louis Cardinals making veiled threats. Well, we'd hate to move to somewhere else,
right?
But
across the river.
If you guys don't give us a state, well, go ahead. I would say, have you been across the river? Just go ahead and move there. Go ahead. Just go right ahead and move there. You just move your team there and see how many people come to games.
Right.
Anyway, but the stadiums there, the Oakland Alameda Coliseum has way outlived its usefulness. There was a time in a past couple of seasons where the sewers backed up.
Yeah.
And the opposing team's dugout was filled with sewage.
Yes.
During games. Come on.
Yeah,
can't we do something here?
Something needs to happen there, absolutely. And Joe, in relation to what you were saying about the betting odds, notice we're currently watching the St. Louis Cardinals on Bally Sports. What's Bally's business again?
Oh, yeah. I
Slot
think that
machines.
This is what it's Joe's right. This is what it's leading to eventually.
Yes.
Now, you can't do it in Missouri. The Bally is very much in vogue in the state of Missouri as far as watching things, but not betting. You can't do that yet.
Yes.
But I do think that will happen somewhere along the line. But you're right. The gambling aspect of it is really coming full force now. Many states, and not Missouri, but many states, you can bet on the college football games, and who doesn't clandestinely? So it's sure, from one aspect of things, the certain element of our society will say, oh, it's not good. It's going to lead to all sorts of degradation to the human being. And so, well, come on. Not really. Because it is part of the recreation. You can go overboard with anything.
Sure.
Alcohol, just anything.
Absolutely.
Eating, come on.
Anything to excess.
That's exactly right. And the same thing would be here. I would bet that get this.
Bet.
I would bet that 98% of the individuals who gamble know their limitations.
I would disagree with that wholeheartedly.
Well, maybe so. I don't know any figures. I am guessing with the people that I deal with that for the most part they're very mature and understanding about what they can do and what they can't do, and they don't get terribly carried away. Now, there are circumstances where, oh, my God, I won $300. Time to put everything on this.
Oh, yeah.
Come on. How often does this happen? I wonder. But yes, I think it is the going thing in sports now.
Let's come back and talk about this in the next segment because I'm interested to get everybody's thoughts about gambling in sports because it's obviously changing. Mm-hmm. You're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, a proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Yep, we are doing Ned Talk. We're talking about sports on a beautiful Sunday Memorial Day weekend. Ned will probably get out and mow.
Not probably will.
Will get out and mow. Shirtless, so ladies.
No, that won't happen.
Driving around. Let's talk more about gambling in sports because, it was a big no-no most of our lives growing up. It was a big no-no, I'm sure, for you and talking about sports because the Black Sox scandal and many other scandals throughout the year, especially college basketball.
That dates back
really hard
to my youth. As a matter of fact, the college basketball scandals that did occur back in the late 40s and early 50s, there were teams in New York City that were big-time college basketball powers. NYU, CCNY, these were really major national powers. And now NYU plays Division III and CCNY may also play Division III. They had to lower the scale of the program all because the gamblers got involved. All the games back then, back in the late 40s and early 50s, were played at Madison Square Garden, all the big ones. And the NIT was bigger than the NCAA back then. And the NIT got itself in hot water. As a matter of fact, there was one year in 1951 in which the folks in New York invited all these big-name teams to come there for doubleheaders, St. John's against Kentucky, and maybe Fordham against some other big school, UCLA or somebody, and they'd love to get New York, Madison Square Garden, heavens, yes, we're going there, big crowds and all that sort of thing. Of course, no TV back then, but gambling was huge. Well, in 1951, excuse me, one of the schools got involved in I think it was CCNY, got involved in a gambling circumstance. And also implicated in that circumstance, never accused, but implicated, was Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And Ad Offerup, the Baron of the Bluegrass, shut down his program for that 1 year. They said, we will not play no basketball. And this is a great Kentucky team and wonderful backing from the fans and so forth. Just one of the iconic sports programs in the country. And Kentucky shut down, all because of gambling, all because that happened. Then in where was either a freshman or sophomore, I don't remember, at Temple, Philadelphia's St. Joe's. St. Joseph's went to the Final Four, played Ohio State in the semifinals, had a 5-0 lead in the game, and lost it about 98 to 60 something. That was Jerry Lucas and John Havlicek and a great Ohio State team that went on to win the state championship. St. Joe, back then they had a third place game. St. Joe's won the third place game, beat Utah or somebody. Later on, at a postseason banquet, everybody, the Philadelphia media was all there, all the big names, maybe 1,000 people. They noticed that the St. Joe's team just really wasn't very excited. Why? Because they were about to be implicated in point shaving. And they were. Now, their program didn't get shut down, but Dr. Ramsey had to have no scholarships for a couple of years, so that'll eliminate any kind of building of a roster that you're going to have. All that has occurred, and since then, when I was here at KY3, Boston College got involved in a point-shaving scandal. Very easy for these kids to do and understand, say, hey, I'm going to give you $10,000. You don't have to lose the game, just shave the points on it. Mm-hmm. It can happen, and you saw the NBA referee.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And that's one of the things, for people who don't understand, one of the worst things that can happen to a sport is that the public begins to believe that it's manipulated by an outside source. And I think you see a little bit of that feeling, not a huge amount, where people have lost confidence in the sport, but I think you see it in basketball, in professional basketball, and I think you see it a bit in the NFL too. Not to a degree where people are jumping up and down and saying there's something going on here or that it's being manipulated, but that thought is in the back of people's minds. And when you have a referee who gets caught, then it really starts to put that notion in your mind.
And Joe, what really bothered me personally about the NBA situation where the referee, the NBA and the late commissioner now.
David Stern.
David Stern.
Yes.
David Stern and his whole entourage was immediate in saying he's the only one. This is an isolated incident. Wait a minute, how the hell do you know he's the only one when you just came out with the story? They covered that up so fast, he couldn't possibly have been the only one.
I agree.
Now, how stinking is that whole circumstance? Donahue, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Tim Donahue.
He goes to jail, and within the first 2 months of being in jail, both his legs are broken.
Well, I mean, I think we kind of live in an age where we don't like to think that there's organized crime still exists.
That's what I was just going to bring up.
But organized crime was very involved in the Tim Donahue situation.
Sure was.
They may not be as powerful as they once were, but they're still there. They're still making moves.
I think it's a different animal that we're dealing with now in the technological age that we are in. And I think those elements are definitely still out there, and that's unfortunately the downside of betting on sports. There's always going to be somebody that can put down a life-changing bet, and they may do anything in the world to try to ensure that happens.
And when that does happen, the credibility, as Joe just pointed out, with the fan base has been fractured, and you can't have that because that ruins the whole scheme of things in all of athletics. And how many times have you seen it? You mentioned the NFL or the NBA or anything where a strange play has occurred that does alter the outcome of the game. Well, it's part of athletics, number one, but the cynic, and moi may be one of them sometimes. There it is right there. I think the most glaring one that I ever saw, ever, at any time in any place, was in the Navy in 1965, watching Muhammad Ali and Sonny Liston in Maine, and come on,
The Phantom Punch.
Phantom Punch. That was a Phantom Punch. There was no punch.
Right.
And he takes the dive down there, and it's later been generally accepted now that the fix was in.
Yeah.
Well, that happened. It happened in front of everybody.
Yeah.
And while there was the immediate denial, no, come on, you can only fool the public. Some of the people all the time, most of the people all the time, or whatever it is, not all the people all the time.
Right.
Well, it's always, we were talking earlier about foreign substances on baseball. It's always looking for somebody to get advantage, whether it's one way or another. Josh, your thoughts on all the gambling in sports?
Well, I like to do some gambling on sports, but what I usually do is I'll bet on my favorite team to win their championship or something basic like that. I'm not typically betting on individual games very often, but I see the problem with what it creates. I mean, you look at like SMU's football team, they got the death penalty because of all the weird stuff going on. And I will go to my grave saying that UNLV was paid to lose to Duke in that because Duke had more money to buy their first national championship in basketball.
Oh, Brian Tyndall's going to come down here and kick your butt.
Well, whatever. Tell him to get in line. But yeah, and so I that's the underbelly of it, is if gambling is accepted with sports, there will be situations where it's manipulated. The outcome is manipulated. I am a cynic when it comes to the NFL, and I say it all the time. The referees control the outcome of the games because of the way that penalties are called. They can control tempo. They can control momentum. They can control if one team's playing too well, suddenly you start calling more holding and more offense or pass interference or illegal contact because the players have grown up and developed to commit those penalties because it doesn't get called as often. It doesn't get called every play because that would really bog down the game. So things like that, I'm a cynic when it comes to that kind of stuff. So
let me get all your thoughts on what I think bothers me the most about fantasy sports and gambling is that there's so many meta or little fractured things that you can bet on all the way through.
Oh, yeah.
You see people get upset all the time. You know, the Jets won 21-10, but they could have scored a touchdown with 30 seconds left, and that would have, beat the spread. And you see people get upset about things like that. That bothers me because then you're not interested in the actual you're not rooting for the team. You're rooting for something
money.
else. You're rooting for the money.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's the whole point that John just brought out. In the scheme of things has changed. It isn't winning and losing.
Right.
It's by how much and the point spread, et cetera, et cetera. And you saw it in some games this year, some football games. You bring up the Jets. Was it the Jets-Chiefs? I think it was. The Jets-Chiefs game. The margin was 11, and the Chiefs won it by 12, I think is what it was. I may be missing this, whatever the circumstance was. But it did happen by a margin of 1 point this year. But that's also the way sports happens to morph. That's all part of the game. It's the ones where you miss an extra point.
Yeah.
Or a chip shot field goal from, and that can happen. But yes, what are the percentages of it happening? There are going to be circumstances in question. But by the same token, with today's media being what it is, and I'm not a fan of today's media in any respect, but with the influx of reporters covering games and so forth, can you hide something like that?
I think you can to a point, Ned, and here's the reason I'm going to give. Because, yes, people will say, and I hate to shake everyone out there's faith in humanity, but I'm going to do so.
Uh-oh.
There are fail-safes with the books in Vegas. If they see a huge bet that swings, obviously the odds change. They have protections in place. However, the example I'll give, the McDonald's Monopoly game, which was beyond reproach and people loved playing that. There's a documentary on HBO that shows how this organized crime organization got hundreds of patsies, stole the winning pieces, and divvied them out over a period of years. And, you don't notice it when it's one person in Virginia, one person, somebody's not winning $10 million. But if you have hundreds of $40,000 winners, that fail-safe's not going to prevent things like that. So I think we're naive to think something like that couldn't occur.
Josh?
I think it is occurring.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that as the coverage has increased and we feel like it's harder for them to do it, they have figured out the ways to do it.
Are you guys proclaiming here that there are ways to beat any system going?
Yes.
Beyond a shadow of doubt, yes.
100%.
We revealed a sad truth on the radio today.
I'm living in naivete.
No, I think one of the things that really upset me is I saw a few years ago in a fantasy football game that a player took a knee and he needed like 2 or 3 yards to go over 100 or whatever, and people got really upset, and one guy threatened to break his legs.
Oh,
and just things like that. Just it gets out of hand.
I quit playing fantasy football because the last year that I played was Randy Moss's rookie season. I rooted for the Vikings back then. I really liked watching them, and I would get mad every week because he would only score 1 touchdown, or he'd only have 150 yards receiving, and I'm like, what? I should be enjoying the fact that they're winning and playing so well.
We're going to get to our roundtable discussion, which we've been having all day, but let's get to our comeback story. That's what we're going to talk about on Ned Talk and 104.7 The Cave.
Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs radio network.
Memorial Day weekend. Ned, do you have any plans?
Fire up that lawnmower, you bet.
I've never seen somebody so excited to mow their yard as you are.
Well, it's, in my case, a sense of accomplishment.
I would think you would have a team of people that would come and do your yard. And you'd watch from the window while you sipped a cup of coffee. And
yeah. Well, it wouldn't be sipping coffee, but...
Oh, you're a coffee drinker. I know you are. So let's go into our roundtable discussion. We had a big story last week in one of the majors. The PGA? Was that the tournament?
It was Phil Mickelson coming back and winning the oldest one ever.
50.
Am I assuming that you want to talk about the great comeback?
Yeah, let's talk about comebacks. Phil made me get out my clubs. I'm just a little bit older than him, and I think maybe I've got a shot at the British Open next year.
Yes. There you go.
I'm trying. I'm working on it.
Give yourself some time.
My greatest comeback is not from the one that you guys might expect. The fact that the man came back. Dave Dravecki. Do you guys remember Dave Dravecki?
Yes, this was one I was going to bring up.
Dave Dravecki, here's a guy who was diagnosed with bone cancer in his arm. This is 1989 or 90, somewhere around there. And he's a very good pitcher, very good lefty for the San Francisco Giants, and is a very good pitcher. All-star, highly regarded, all that sort of thing. He opts for the treatment. They said, we think we can isolate this and so forth. Goes through a freezing technique on the bone, tries his first comeback, and then I think maybe had some kind of an arm problem or maybe a muscle problem. Comes back for the second time, still going on with the freezing treatment. He's pitching in Montreal, and I think he's in the second inning. Does that
Second
sound
inning,
right?
I believe,
Second
yes.
inning, unloads a pitch, and the crack, the snap of the bone is heard around Olympic Stadium. Sounds like a rifle shot. He has broken his arm. The freezing technique, I guess physicians did not realize this, but the freezing technique had weakened the arm. This is a major league pitcher. And the only recourse now is what's called a disarticulation. It is an amputation, yes, but it is not one in which the arm is cut off. It is disarticulated from the socket. So it is pulled out. Now, there's surgery involved, of course, but that's how it's done. The complete arm is removed. I had the opportunity and did so, interviewed him about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years ago when he was here to speak at New Covenant Academy. Wonderfully articulate guy, forthcoming with the story as you might. He's a motivational speaker. But I asked him point blank, I said, do you still, just level with me, we're not faulting you or anything, do you still feel the effects? He said, oh yeah, absolutely. Sure. And it's been 20 years ago. And I said, there is such a thing following an amputation or the removal of a limb of phantom pain. He said, absolutely. He said, I still feel it 20 years later, and I still have to overcome that mentally. And boy, this guy is just plain tough. Absolutely tough to come back from a circumstance like that, expose himself to the public and speak about it, speak about overcoming the tremendous trials that you have to go through, even attempting to come back as a major league pitcher.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He's my number one.
John, what about you?
This one's a tough one. I'm going to go with one because the term is so frequently used. I'm going to bring up Tommy John.
Yep.
Basically had a career-ending injury by all accounts, went with an experimental surgery that now is in our vernacular. And I think a lot of people, when they say the phrase Tommy John surgery, don't realize its namesake. He came back, pitched well for the rest of his career, and in my opinion, should be a Hall of Famer.
It's an underwear company now, too, by the way.
Oh, is it?
Tommy John Underwear.
No, I didn't know that.
Online, which is kind of unfortunate for
He
him.
has to be getting some money for
I hope
Right.
he is. I hope that he
I hope
is.
so, too.
What about you, Josh?
Oh, I'm going to say Alex Smith.
I was going to say Alex Smith, too.
Sorry, I took yours. Just because, I mean, after the injury that he suffered, they were talking about amputation for him. And for him not only to get through all of that, but then to come back and have a solid season with Washington, it's amazing because he had nothing to prove to anybody. He was proving it to himself. And I think that's the same with all these other guys. Nobody's going to fault them for saying I'm done. But
No.
they, in their mind, knew that there was something else that they had to accomplish. And so it's very inspirational to see these guys come back, have the success that they've had, and then they leave on their own terms.
I think there's so many different types of comeback stories. We might be watching one right now with Albert Pujols.
Yes.
Getting released by the Angels, and then he's had a little impact on the Dodgers. Not huge, but he's coming up with some big hits for them.
The fact that he is there and is still one of the great hitters in the game, but does his really count as a comeback, though? Because he hasn't been out of the game, and he has had sore feet. But does that count as really a catastrophic injury, like a Theismann who gets his leg snapped in two on television, comes back? And another one, and I think it was Paul George, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, the horrible
injury.
Yes.
Yeah, that was in the Olympic trials, for God's sake, that his happened. He snapped his leg. He's back playing. That injury apparently is one in which if you get to the physicians, the orthopedic surgeons in time, they can put it back and you're okay. Not great, but you're okay.
I'm going to give you one out of right field. It's a different sort of comeback story. Ron LaFleur.
Oh, yeah.
Who went to prison.
Yes.
Went to prison and came back and played Major League Baseball at a high level.
Yes.
Listened to fans chant at him all the time in the outfield and say things to him. But Ron LaFleur is a story of a man with strength who overcame what he did to himself and then was able to come back and play in sports. But it's nice to see somebody like Phil Mickelson, who it has to be the streakiest golfer.
Oh my God!
I mean, you think that he's done, and the next thing he does, he wins the Master. He won't make cuts, and then all of a sudden he gets on a course and bang, it clicks for him.
Yep.
He's the same one who, in a tournament, I think 2 or 3 years ago, one of the majors was so bad. And he hit a putt that was, so far off, and then he ran after the putt and stopped it before.
Yes.
Come on. Nobody does that. And here's a guy who wins the PGA, wins a major, the oldest one ever to win a major.
I actually saw, John knows this, John coached baseball with me, is one of my pet peeves with coaching was throwing your glove. I saw a Major League player throw his glove the other day at a ball.
That's ground rule. That's a triple.
Yeah. Yeah, he threw, he was a second baseman. The ball got by him, and he threw his glove at it. And I thought, wow, what sort of mental breakdown are we seeing?
Right.
Back to Mickelson for just a split second. I wonder how many of you guys remember this. It was last September, as a matter of fact, late August or September, and the PGA was continuing with a revamped schedule, and they have these playoffs. It's the, I've forgotten what they call it now, but it's a series of four competitions in which you play off and gradually reduce the field down to the PGA Championship in Atlanta. Well, Phil Z failed to qualify for the tournament in Massachusetts, and I think it was September, I think it was. So he didn't qualify. He's not going to be able to play round 3 and 4, I guess is what it was. He looked around, and wait a minute, where's this Branson? Yeah, Branson. He had qualified for the Champions Tour. He was that age, qualified. Well, let's just fly there. He's got his own plane, flies down, wins the doggone thing. In his first Champions event, comes down and wins it in Branson Moe, and said, "Well, it's a pretty good weekend after all."
You talk about him being, or I mentioned that he's incredibly streaky. I know you bet a little bit. I know you bet a little bit. Do you, either one of you, bet on golf at all?
No.
That's a tough one. But
yeah.
if you were, would you put any money on him at all?
Never. Never.
No. I mean, and going into it's a great comeback story when you see Phil Mickelson. And he's one of those guys, too. I think that sports and sports fans have kind of a love-hate relationship with Phil Mickelson. Sometimes you think, oh, this is a really good guy. And then other times you think, this guy is so out of touch with anybody that doesn't make less than $1 million a year that,
right.
What do you mean you don't have your own private plane?
Right.
And the answer is no, I don't. But if I were going to bet on any golf, an individual, it would be on Bryson DeChambeau or Brooks Koepka, one of those two, two individuals, because they're going to be the ones who will emerge. Yeah. Guys like Rory McIlroy and people like that, they're up there, but how often do they win? And it's diminishing for those guys.
Well, I can tell you because I have an app that's it's a free betting thing, and if you pick like certain winners and what their scores are going to be, and you can win up to $50,000 a week. I've never won anything doing golf and I'll pick Bruce Koepka and Bo. What's his name?
DeChambeau.
The most interesting names are in golf, don't you think?
Crazy ones.
Who names somebody Bubba?
I've never won anything on the golf part of it. I've always been. And I don't understand how people do it. They've just got to be lucky.
It is luck. It's more than it's got to be very. When you're dealing with teams and individuals in track events or something like that, sure, you have some basis for what you're doing. But in golf, it's
you're listening to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave, part of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network. Back to Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave. A proud member of the Kansas City Chiefs Radio Network.
Beautiful day in front of us. 65 right now, sunny skies, 70 this afternoon for a high, and then 51 for an overnight low. The clouds will roll in overnight. But still, it's a beautiful day, beautiful Memorial Day weekend. And we talk at this point of the show and ask each other what we're going to watch on TV this afternoon. Ned has already made it very clear that he is mowing. So will you be watching anything?
Probably not, but I'll tell you what I will do after listening to you with that forecast and with our subject matter being what it was. Let's take some bets here as to what time the clouds roll in tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I'm certainly not going to use the Weather Channel to help me with that in any way, shape, or form. But I was going to ask you, last week you said you watched the Division II championships. How was the game?
It was the 1AA.
1AA
championships. It was won by Sam Houston State in a really narrow victory over a great South Dakota State team. And I'll tell you, had to sit there watching it. Here's a kid from South Dakota State who's running on the ground, accumulated 180 yards in the game, and also ran 85 yards for a touchdown that put them ahead. Now, eventually, Sam Houston State won in the end, but this kid runs, and the announcer's screaming at the top of his lungs, "There goes Isaiah Davis!" I said, how curious is that? He's got the same name as that kid from Joplin, who was a top player last year. So it was.
Same kid. Yep.
Same kid from Joplin High School, the Gatorade Player of the Year.
Yep.
And he's playing in Brookings, South Dakota. Wait a minute. Why is he not wearing the maroon and white here, or the black and gold at MU, or maybe the green and gold at Missouri Southern? No, he's up there at South Dakota State. How in the world did this happen? And he is a sophomore next year. Thank you. Anyway, it was a solid game. Fortunately for Missouri State, they don't play South Dakota State next year. They're not on the schedule. But North Dakota, the team that knocked them out, is on the schedule, and they are here on, I think it's last Saturday in October, whatever that is.
So what are you going to watch? Are you going
today?
Yeah.
Probably tonight, a little bit of the NASCAR, just to get the flavor of the 600 that they run down in Charlotte. That's their answer, NASCAR's answer to the Indy 500.
The flavor will be barbecue sauce. That will be the flavor.
Beer.
What about you, John? What are you going to watch?
I'll probably watch baseball a lot of the day. You know, with the MLB package. Unfortunately, I can't watch the Cardinals live because
Why did they change that?
Well, it's all. Here's my little editorial. Blackout restrictions need to end.
They need to change.
It's an outdated policy. People are still going to go to the games. Blackout restrictions were in place when they were at 10% capacity this year. How are people going to get to the game? What are you blacking it out for? So I'm frustrated by all that. But I'll watch some other teams and enjoy that.
What are you going to watch, Josh?
If I can find it on TV, I'm going to watch Game 7 of the Toronto Maple Leafs Montreal Canadiens playoff series.
Nice.
The Canadiens won Game 1, lost 3 in a row, and then have won 2 in a row to get it to Game 7. And that's the team I follow is Montreal.
Let's really quickly get with you because yesterday, Champions League Championship.
Yep.
That's too many champions in one sentence.
It is. The
One too
UEFA
many.
Champions League champion is Chelsea.
Chelsea.
Yes, which is an interesting.
I know Chelsea. She's really nice.
There's some good Chelseas in the world. So one of the cool things about that is they have a player, an American player named Christian Pulisic, who became the first American player to win a Champions League championship. So because by and large, most of the European leagues don't have Americans playing. So he's a treasure. He's a great player.
He's a treasure.
He's a treasure.
Oh, that's a one of those you're saying a word that your parents would
Yeah,
say.
I know. Isn't that
He's
funny?
a treasure.
Did he play college soccer here?
I'm sure he did, but I have no idea where. Because I don't like him. He doesn't play for Liverpool, so who cares?
That's your favorite team, Liverpool. Why?
Yeah.
Why did you choose Liverpool?
I've got a couple of friends who live in Liverpool, and so when I started watching Premier League, I would talk to them on Facebook and stuff, and they're like, "You can't root for anybody but Liverpool." And then they have such a rich history. It's fun to.
For those of you who don't know John or Josh very well, Josh is a name dropper and a place dropper. So just thought we'd pass it along to everybody. Well, enjoy your TV watching, guys. We will see you next Sunday for another round of Ned Talk. If you are tuning in and wanting to hear Led Zeppelin, I'm sure they're coming up shortly. But you can always listen to us as a podcast wherever you get your podcast at. I want to say thanks to Scott Meyer, Corbin Campbell, and Mike the Intern. We'll see you next Sunday for Ned Talk on 104.7 The Cave.